good evening, and a very warm and Garba energetic welcome to the learning session of Masterclass 11. Before we begin the class, I would like you to tell about the initiative Practical Cities. This initiative is for all urban enthusiasts who wants to learn about practical and ongoing projects which make our city more livable and sustainable. The current learning theme is on urban water sanitation, presenting the subject on understanding of wash tools for excreta management of a city. In the previous class, we had learned about wastewater management and its reuse component. Now I'll start with today's session. So the term in water sanitation are simple abbreviations, but as subject, it relates with accessible, clean and safe water to all and proper hygienic practices for everyone. As finances are required to purchase and run a housing system, basic infrastructure like water and sanitation services plays a crucial role in shaping lives of a citizen. To understand this more in depth, we have Bhitush Luthra, who was a former program manager in Center for Science and Environment, New Delhi. He holds a 6 years of experience dedicatedly in the field of water and sanitation, and he was currently working with the National Mission for Clean Ganga for mainstreaming FSSM in the basin. And apart from that, he was a technical head for mainstreaming fecal, sludge and septage management in small towns of Uttar Pradesh for achieving and management citywide sanitation services. Welcome to the platform of Practical Cities, sir.
Thank you.
So, sir, I'll start with the question that how are you seeing wash tools and techniques taking place in the urban infrastructure sector?
So, I mean, just to say that tools are there to only support us. So, if we are thinking that if we just put some information in a tool and the magic will happen and the sanitation will improve or the solution will be there in front of us, then it's not going to happen. So no tool can replace the mind. So it's actually important. We should understand what tool to use when, and also don't expect too much out of the tool because there are so much of on-ground realities which should be taken care of, and the tools are only there to help practitioners to get better solutions. Yeah. So so sanitation is a complex subject. It's not very easy, and that's the reason a lot of researchers and practitioners have actually developed these tools which can help the peer group to come to the solution or find a solution and not wasting too much of time, and that's the only purpose tools will solve. So I'll share my screen, and today we are going to just see some of the tools because there's a plethora of tools available in terms of sanitation space. But let's see what can we cover today. So before getting into any of the tools, I think first and foremost, it's important to understand so I'll be concentrating in urban space. So what have we done in terms of so-called cities we live in? So this picture is actually I don't have to kind of explain this picture. This conveys the scenario we can see all around the country and beyond in all the cities we call them. Yeah. So its sanitation is one of the most neglected sector. I'm not just saying India, South Asian and African countries. So one mindset we all have is let's take away the waste from our site. And what happens to the waste is actually nobody's concerned. So that approach has taken us where we see this picture, that the waste should just go away from my site, and then what happens to it, nobody cares. So, but then unfortunately, if we don't take care of it, it's actually going to impact all other sectors, be it health, nutrition, development, economy, dignity, empowerment, and environment, of course. So this is kind of setting the context why we need to improve sanitation, all over sanitation, as well as specifically for cities. And that's the reason, one of the reasons that a lot of tools actually came into being. Yeah, so I'll kind of touch upon some of the tools what are available, and maybe I would request Practical Cities group to kind of share these links with all of you who are attending this masterclass. So there are certain tools or approaches, be it city sanitation planning, citywide sanitation planning, citywide inclusive sanitation, sanitation safety planning, water safety planning. So all of these are kind of approaches which are followed to better plan to plan sanitation in a better way for the cities. So these are all approaches, and eventually you get a living document which can help you to understand what projects should a city really implement. But again, so these are approaches, and then there are tools which are going to help you to develop these or improve upon these approaches. So moving on to narrowing on to the tools we have. So we have kind of understood these tools. There can be diagnostic tools. There can be tools which are going to help you in planning. There are going to be tools which are going to help you in data collection. So to name a few, in diagnostic tools, we have KPI monitoring, we have city service delivery assessment, we have shit flow diagrams, fecal waste flow calculator, another form of shit flow diagram which IRC developed. So in this presentation, I've kind of given a brief description and use and how the interface of the tool is, but I'm not going into detail of each of the tools. Some more diagnostic tools could be SaniPath, stakeholder engagement planning, SaniTab. So SaniTab is actually going to help you to collect data in a much better way through using tablets or phones and not forms. So it's a data collection tool which is extensively used to better gather data and then of course do a better plan. Then there are planning and decision-making tools. There's a tool called Mount, which is kind of keeping a record of all best management practices, as well as the implementers. A list of implementers is also available, and all new technologies which are, you can say, green in nature are kind of uploaded in this particular tool. Then there is an FSM toolbox. So FSM is fecal sludge management for those who don't know this term. This toolbox is again going to help anybody who wants to implement FSM in a city right from scratch. How to collect data, how to involve stakeholders, and then what are the technologies available, and then how to calculate the load of fecal sludge, etc., etc. Similarly, there is a Sanitech, and then there is a SaniPlan tool, which is a very comprehensive tool which takes care of performance assessment, planning, and financial planning. And then they have a shorter version of SaniPlan also, which only concentrates on FSM. But then this is a very, very comprehensive tool where the municipality are supposed to feed in data, and as the data grows, you are able to understand how the city is growing and how you should really plan for improved sanitation. Yeah. So another aspect, so I'm not getting into all these tools right now, but just wanted to kind of show you that there are a plethora of tools available, but you should be knowing what tool to use where.
Yes, correct.
So today's masterclass, I thought we should be concentrating on one tool and try and understand that tool better, and how that tool has helped practitioners to kind of achieve the objective for which that tool was actually developed. And that tool is called shit flow diagram. And so I'm going to start with discussing why actually there was a need to really talk about or to actually have a tool called shit flow diagram. So so one of the reasons to actually develop this tool was that for last 5-6 decades in India and South Asia and Africa, there has been an understanding that sanitation means centralized sewage systems. And that idea has been engraved in our minds that the improved sanitation can only and only happen when you have centralized sewage systems. And in last 50-60 years, India has also realized that the kind of investment required and kind of resources required, the kind of time required to implement even a one project of centralized sewerage system is huge. And not only that, the kind of inconvenience the general public will have while implementing those projects is also enormous. Having said that, once the treatment plant is done, running the treatment plant is again a big ask. So you need skill set. You would need again too much of resources to keep that system running, and then there's political pressure in terms of you can't charge the general public too much on treatment aspect. So over the years, the point I'm trying to say is that all that investment done, slowly and steadily, we started realizing that we are only able to cater to very small section of population of the city with that project, and not all people, which the sustainable development goal says that we should be not leaving anyone behind. And that is something a sustainable city will be able to give good sanitation to all and not to a few. So because this was happening, so there was a need to understand or to visualize the excreta management of a city in a better way, so that the decision makers could be advocated in a and the problem at hand could be understood in a much better way. So this was one of the reasons. The other reason was that uh, a lot, for quite some time we believed that access to toilet, if that is arranged somehow, the sanitation is improved.
Correct.
So we were not looking at the complete chain. And last 5-6 years also, what we have seen is the Swachh Bharat mission, though it's a very successful campaign, but in that campaign also, what we were able to look at was, can we have access to toilet? But what is happening after the toilet is something which was not given enough importance right from day one. I'm not saying it's not happening now; it is happening now. But so this is till date we were still struggling to give access to toilet, and that was considered to be a good sanitation for quite some time. So Million Development Goals was something the ultimate we thought, and now we are of course in the era of Sustainable Development Goals, where the environment is also given equal importance, because if you continue to pollute water bodies, the water, so because we are talking about wash here, if we want to give safe water, we need to improve our sanitation. So that's something the understanding have grown over the years. But since that understanding was not there for some time, a need for this tool was required, that which could convey the story of the complete chain of sanitation. We'll come to that. What is this complete chain? Another reason was that a lot of cities do not really have data that what is happening on ground. And as I said, that since we believe sanitation is equal to sewerage systems, if your house is connected to sewerage network, we have the data. I'm talking about urban local body here. But if your house is not connected to a sewerage system, you're on your own. The municipality has no concern about the sanitation scenario of your house. So that was something which was prevalent. And so all these reasons kind of contributed to the need to have a tool which could represent the situation on ground in a way which is understandable by the decision makers. So in I think in 2013, World Bank had done the very first shit flow diagrams of 12 cities all over the world. And that was the kind of origin of shit flow diagrams. So these are the organizations who came together to brainstorm how can we really develop this tool called shit flow diagram. So what is a shit flow diagram? It is an effective communication advocacy tool which can help engage city stakeholders, political leaders, sanitation experts, NGOs in a coordinated dialogue about excreta management. It's a tool which engineers, planners, decision makers can use. Another important aspect is that since we're not going to get into, so you can't expect a DPR based on a shade flow diagram. A shade flow diagram is going to help you to understand the sanitation situation of the city on ground as on date. And it is not going to kind of tell you the exact volumes, which will kind of result into a DPR. So of course, to do a DPR for a project, you have to do feasibility study. So I'm kind of telling the limitation. It's not an engineering tool per se. It's more of an advocacy tool.
Correct.
And this tool is, or the shade flow diagram is going to represent public health hazard. So we generally use two colors in this diagram. One is red, one is green. And it's a no-brainer to say that more the diagram is red, you are more in trouble. And if it is more of contributing to green color, that means you are managing the excreta better. Another aspect which we kind of considered while developing this tool was we will be talking about in terms of percentage of population and not in volumes or kg tons of excreta. And one of the reasons was because irrespective of what kind of sanitation system your household is connected to, at the end of the day, what we are looking at is each and every person in the city getting good sanitation. Since the crux of the tool is people, the unit of in which the diagram is done is also percentage of people or percentage of population. So it gives you a broad idea in terms of percentage of population, how much percentage of population is having access to good sanitation, or the excreta of what percentage of population is being managed, in other words. Of course, it also, so looking at the diagram, you can comprehend what are the key areas where the investments are required. So this is another aspect of the diagram which is important to understand. So having said that, of course, it's a graphic. As I said, there are some green and red arrows. But then the graphic is not going to kind of explain the whole story. So there is an accompanying report to it, which is going to talk about the quality of the service. For example, I say the households are connected to sewerage system. Of course, the numbers are shown, but how good or how old the sewerage system is going to be coming from the report. As well as whatever the graphic is explaining, what were the sources of data used to develop that graphic is also the report going to talk about. So, so in terms of quantities, in terms of numbers, the graphic is of course important. But in terms of quality of the service and with respect to the source of data used to develop the report or the graphic, the report, accompanying report plays an important role. So, so let's try and understand what this graphic is. So I'm not going to get into too much of details, but I'm going to give you an overview how this diagram is. Yeah.
Yes.
So, so if you see, this is a master shade flow diagram irrespective of the city. These are the kind of arrows which can get originated in any kind of a shade flow diagram. So if you observe, there are some green arrows, and each of the arrow has some width, and then there are some red arrows. And towards the end of the story of that particular chain, if the arrow turns red, it kind of turns down. You can see the red arrows turning down. But if till the last stage of the sanitation chain, the excreta is managed well, it continues to be going towards the right, and the arrow is green. So that's a basic difference how you kind of read the diagram. So to understand how do we really decide, or how the tool decides whether the arrow is going to be green or red, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Before getting into the decision of red and green, important is, so what is the X and the Y axis of the graphic? So if you see on your left hand side, you see there are three boxes. So either the first question is whether the individual has access to toilet. If the answer is yes, then there are two more possibilities. Either the toilet is connected to an on-site system, so for example, a septic tank, a pit latrine, a twin pit system, or any other kind of tank which is the toilet connected to is an on-site system, or the toilet could be connected to an off-site system like a sewerage system, a closed drain. Um, the basic difference is whether you have a containment system or a box which is going to store your excreta at the source. If the answer is yes, you're talking about on-site sanitation. If the answer is no, that directly from the toilet, the excreta is conveyed off-site elsewhere, then it's off-site sanitation. So we realize that there are only broadly three categories: one off-site, on-site, and if you don't have access to toilet, then you're defecating in open. So apart from these three broad categories, we could not find any other category, and we realized that if we have percentage of population of all these three added up, it should convey 100% population of the city. So that's our kind of left-hand axis. At the top, we have the sanitation service chain. Most of you must be aware of this chain. And this is also called sanitation value chain. This is also called service chain. So why a chain? Because excreta moves from one stage to the other in the city through this chain. Yeah. Not that every stage is kind of relevant to each of the sanitation systems, but broadly speaking, these are the steps or stages of the sanitation chain. So the very first stage is containment, that you contain the excreta in whether an on-site system or via sewerage system. And then emptying is an important step for on-site sanitation system, where the excreta is stored in a tank or a pit. You need to empty that excreta, or you may not call it excreta anymore. So once it is stored for some time, we call it fecal sludge. I believe most of you would be aware of this. So we need to empty fecal sludge, and we need to transport it ideally to a treatment system or a treatment plant. But on ground, reality is that since the local bodies are not really concerned about systems which are on site, and that's the reality on ground, uh, actually a lot of private players have come into foray, taking care of emptying service and transfer service. Having said that, because private parties are playing their part, treatment actually goes for a toss, because neither the government thinks it's their responsibility. Private party, till the time they find any good value in terms of business, they may not really get into this stage of treatment plant. So ideally, treatment, it should not end at treatment. There should be another stage of end use or reuse, because we are talking about sustainable cities here. But then that aspect is kind of left to the report, if any city is planning or is looking forward to doing that. So these are the two axes in which we will look all the arrows getting distributed. And so the next major question which we need to answer is, how does the arrows really turn red or green? But before that, it's actually really important to record the date on which you're kind of developing this shit flow diagram, because with time, this diagram will change. So this diagram which we are referring to today is done in 2015 of a city called Cuttack. And so today, if we do a shit flow diagram for Cuttack, it will be totally different. So I mean, that's the reason it's really, really important to record the date we are developing the shit flow diagram for. This is the service chain. So from all these boxes, the arrows which originate is going to represent that respective sanitation system. Again, the width of these boxes are going to represent the percentage of population. We kind of touched upon this as well. Okay, so the very, very important question is, how do we decide, or how does the tool decide whether it's going to be red or green? So for this, we kind of ask this question at each stage, whether the sanitation system or the technology being used is able to contain the pathogen transmission to the general public. So in other words, if at one particular stage of the sanitation chain, the system which is for which we are kind of considering whether it's going to be red or green, if that system is able to restrict the pathogen transmission to the general public, if the answer is yes, it is restricting, the arrow automatically turns green for that particular stage. But if the system which is prevalent in your city is not able to contain that excreta or restrict that pathogen transmission to general public, then the answer is the arrow is going to turn red. So yeah, that's what is kind of mentioned in the definition here. A sanitation technology which ensures the safe level of protection from excreta, that is pathogen transmission to the user or general public, is limited. It's going to be called as a contained system or a technology. That means the arrow is going to turn green. So that's the question. That's the only question being asked at each stage of the sanitation chain, and the answer of that question or the degree of that. So if you say we have reached 50%, people are dependent on a particular system, but 25%, the answer is yes, we are able to contain. So we'll see a 25% arrow turning green and 25% turning red. It's as simple as that. But having said that, this is something that tool is going to do it for you. But this is for our understanding how the tool is operating. And of course, there are certain abbreviations being used. One is WW, which is going to represent wastewater. FS is going to be representing fecal sludge, and SN is going to represent the supernatant. So, so the arrows for wastewater is always going to originate from off-site sanitation. The arrows for fecal sludge and supernatant are going to originate from on-site sanitation. So the big question is, so wastewater we can relate to, which is coming, the black water which comes out of the toilet we are talking about. Fecal sludge we talked about is something, excreta when kind of stored for some time in an on-site system. What we extract out of that containment system is fecal sludge. But what is a supernatant? So a lot of times a septic tank is implemented on ground because the building code says that if you don't have access to sewerage system, the household is supposed to develop a septic tank in most of the cases. And because they do implement septic tanks, a septic tank works in a way that it stores the excreta for some time, it digests the excreta for some time, it helps in doing a little bit of solid liquid separation, and then there is an outlet of a septic tank. So what comes out of a septic tank is in shit flow diagram terminology called supernatant. It is relatively solid free liquid. It is partially treated liquid, but having said that, you still need to further treat it. It's not completely pathogen free. A solution for cities where the groundwater table is not high, septic tank followed by a soak pit kind of fits the bill, and the supernatant eventually goes into a soak pit. So, so in a way, you don't have to worry about that. But what we have seen in most of the cases in India, the kind of SMDs we have done, is the septic tank is, or the outlet of septic tank is actually connected to an open drain or a storm sewer, which means that the supernatant is actually flowing throughout the city unattended. That means partially treated water from all the households is kind of circulating in the city. So, so that means, so if the question being asked at that stage is, if a septic tank is connected to open drain, if I ask myself this question that whether it is going to be a contained technology, the answer is no, because the pathogen is leaking in the environment. So septic tank connected to open drain is going to be called as one technology, and that technology is not able to contain the pathogen transmission. And that's the reason we will, so we'll, once we put values for that kind of system, we will see red arrows originating in this. So, so that's about um, the science behind how the SFDs are done. So let's look at this SFD of one city called Cuttack. You can see a lot of red arrows, a few green arrows. And the point which I wanted to refer to was that each of the red arrow is actually kind of asking the decision maker a sanitation intervention there. So for example, there is an arrow which says that so open defecation is 11%, which means we need to, of course, take care of 11% population for access to toilet. So we need to invest to get toilets to these 11% people. Similarly, if we see super SN not contained delivered to treatment is there, but then there is a big chunk of supernatant, which says 20% supernatant not delivered to treatment plant. So that means there is supernatant flowing into the open drain, which needs to be taken care of. So which attracts another investment to the city. And so no points guessing that as and when you do those interventions, these arrows starts to turn green. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is a shit flow diagram can help you also monitor the progress the city is doing. And it's not just going to tell you, okay, this is the situation today and you forget about it. It's going to also help you to, once you do another round of SMD, you can monitor the progress the city is doing. And you can also kind of extrapolate that if we do a certain intervention in a city, how the SMD changes. And that can help you to decide or prioritize which intervention is kind of more important for the city. So let's move on. I think we've talked too much about what is an SFD and what is the science behind it and how the arrows turn red or green. But in this latter part of my presentation, I wanted to cover, once the SFD is done, what are the possible applications which SFD generator can actually utilize. So a shit flow diagram really helps to do advocacy at all levels, be it at city, be it at state, or at national level. So what you see in this slide is when Bill Gates met Prime Minister Modi, he actually used a shit flow diagram to discuss about sanitation. So right at the top national level also, a shit flow diagram was used to do advocacy. Recently, there was an advisory issued by Government of India, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, with on-site and off-site sewage management practices. This advisory also clearly suggests that each and every city should develop a shit flow diagram. So it is coming from the ministry as well, that to better understand the intervention required in the city, it is good to develop a shit flow diagram for your city. On your left, you see, so to decide on a project, how shit flow diagram was used. So in a small town of Chunar, which is a Ganga basin town, so a shit flow diagram was used for that city to do advocacy to National Mission of Clean Ganga, which is till date really putting all their resources into sewage treatment plants. And so when a shit flow diagram was done for the city, and it was realized that more than 80–90% people are dependent on on-site systems. So intervention like a fecal sludge management for the city makes more sense. So this we could convey to a national organization and also get funding from the project from the same organization. So if you want to get funding from the projects, you can develop a shit flow diagram. If you want to convince the decision makers on certain things which the city needs, you can do a shit flow diagram. And then coming from ministry also, it's not something coming from outside. Now the ministry is also kind of accepting this, that if you do a shit flow diagram, you can do better city sanitation planning for the city. So because I always say that if you want to do a really good city sanitation plan for a city, it is really, really important to understand what's happening on ground today. And if you do a shit flow diagram for your city today, it's going to result into a better plan for sure. And just not India, SFDs are being used all around the globe.
Oh.
For the people who are interested to develop shit flow diagram, this is an important website to go to. Of course, because it is being recorded, you can get this, but it is very simple, sfd.susana.org. You get all the resources you require to develop a SFD. And the most important button which I want to refer to is this graphic generator. This is the tool which is going to help you to develop SFDs if you feed in the relevant data. But you can get all the tutorials how to do SFDs here. You can get all the SFDs done till date, all the reports available here. So this is a site to go to if you want to know anything and everything about shit flow diagrams. And the graphic generator is not just an online tool. You can download it. It's an offline tool as well. So these are the cities which is already done, and these shit flow diagrams have been reviewed on the Susana website. Just to throw some numbers. So what has happened in India so far? It has been institutionalized. We have seen the advisory talking about it. A lot of practitioners have used the SFDs to sensitize decision makers. A lot of organizations have actually used shit flow diagrams to do city sanitation planning. Then another use of shit flow diagram was done where the SFDs for cities were kind of combined together to do a SFD for a state. This was done in the state of Uttar Pradesh. I'm going to show some slides after this. And of course, you can monitor the progress the city is making. So it's if you want to know what's happening in terms of excreta management in the city, as on date, SFD is going to help you. If you want to convince a decision maker by not showing complex Excel sheets and visually representing the situation, and in terms of population, because politicians will understand population better. It's actually going to result into vote banks. So it is very, very relatable in terms of population. So this is the state level analysis which I was referring to, which was done. So all major 66 towns SFD was developed in state of Uttar Pradesh. And if you see, there is a very typical understanding which you can get looking at this graph is a lot of cities actually are dependent too much on on-site system. The rightmost column, if you see, whether red or green is secondary, but look at the percentage of people dependent on on-site systems. And this is very, very skewed if you move from top to bottom. And at the bottom, you have the bigger cities, the million-plus cities. For example, Agra, Kanpur, Lucknow. These cities, if you see, the percentage shifts from on-site to off-site, but still there is a good percentage of population dependent on on-site. And this is a very, very major takeaway for me from shit flow diagram is that cities can comprehend that we have done so much of investment, and still we are not able to cater to the last person of the city in the major towns also. So if you see, there is a good percentage of people dependent on off-site, the middle column at the bottom, but there is still good percentage of population which is dependent on on-site and is still red. So this was done back in 2018 or so. So that's the reason you see a lot of open defecation. I'm sure these numbers would have changed as on date. So what we did, we kind of used all these SFDs and kind of joined them together to do a state level SFD also. So this is another application of SFD where you want to do state level advocacy, that how the state should be deciding on investments. So when we kind of combined all the SFDs together, we realized So this is based on 66 towns, but this is kind of representing more than 60% of the population of the state still. Though in UP we have more than 650 towns and cities, but we have kind of used the biggest 66 towns, and that represent more than 60% of the population. So if this is the situation for the bigger towns, you can imagine what will happen to the smaller towns. After doing all the investments till date, the state is able to take care of excreta of 27% of the population, irrespective of the investment done in the off-site or on-site. This is the scenario which comes out, and when we take this diagram to the state level officials, it's a very relatable and understandable numbers we're going to talk about. We are not getting into million liter per day of wastewater here, and that's the best aspect of the SFD is that the decision makers can understand this language. So these are again some numbers which kind of come out of the SFD of the state, and this SFD of the state also played a major role towards pushing for us state level FSM policy. So till date, the other states were doing it quite well, but Uttar Pradesh was lagging. But when this report was out, it kind of pushed the government to really concentrate on site and do something in terms of policy as well as investments. And that's the reason they decided to also decided to do a lot of investment in on-site sanitation post that. So we've kind of used it for CSPs. We've used it for monitoring. So you can see the SFD done in 2017 for a town in UP, how after doing a little bit of interventions, which are mentioned here, how the SFD has changed. And this also gives a kind of incentive to the city that whatever we are doing is kind of reflecting into something. And the SFD of 2020 to this town is motivating them to further improve these red arrows to green. So another, so though we have not mentioned, this is a motivating tool as well. So I hope I'm not overshot the time to summarize.
No.
So summarize. So it is going to help you to prioritize the interventions. It is going to give you a snapshot of the current situation in a much better way. Not just for you, but for people who matter, the decision makers. It is going to, so at a broader level, discussions are going on, can shit for diagrams contribute to the joint monitoring program, because data is always an issue for monitoring the progress in terms of JMPs. And so the research is on how how SFDs can really contribute to monitor the progress. So the methodology of data collection and analysis to develop SFD is already developed. It's all there on that website I mentioned. So it's actually, so I mean, what we have kind of now available on made available on the website is after doing a lot of iterations. So the previous version of the tools were really complex, Excel based, very complex tool. But what we reached today, where we have reached today, is a very simple to use graphic generator. So if you want to do a better planning,
correct.
If you want to do informed decision making, and if you want to monitor the progress, this tool is going to be helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. The presentation was wonderful. Now, I think after looking at presentation, I have some few questions related to it, sir, that I would like to ask. So, sir, I have two questions. The first one is, sir, sir, what are the three major things that one should keep in mind while designing a tool or using it for analysis purpose? in practice?
So I think in the beginning I had mentioned that our tool is only going to assist you for a particular aspect. So though we talked about today a global tool called shit flow diagram, but I at the same time very strongly believe that the local context plays very important role, and so we can just not blindly use a tool, a global tool also, and say that it is applicable to my city. So we need to pick and choose our tools using our common sense, which is very important.
So one more thing is that how do city administration respond to this type of tools? For me also, that I am also working with wastewater reuse sector and practices that I'm working on. So if we introduce any such tool, because not they are not aware of such method or practices, how do they take on this? How what is their take on the tools and use of these practices?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I missed you.
Yeah. So, sir, how is the response of the city administration fraternity when it comes to putting these tools into practice?
Okay. So I can share my experience that we do a lot of capacity building also in to understand to make sure that the cities use these tools. And the experience which I have had till date is that in India, our officials are so overburdened with their day-to-day tasks that even if there are some champions who would like to really take time out to do it, but they are not able to do it. And slowly and steadily, and that's the reason we shifted our approach to from building capacity of the government officials to do or use these tools to people who are supporting these cities, to practitioners, to development partners, to consultants, because if at all they need to do it, it has to be done timely, and you can't just say that we want them to use it and they can take their own sweet time to do it. And I don't blame them because the kind of work they are doing, they are always understaffed. And having said that, even if they have the skill sets or the intention to do it, they are not able to do it because of the time constraints. And because these day-to-day jobs are, especially for water and sanitation, there are so many problems which are happening. And those problems are happening because we have not really planned well. So I think it's a vicious cycle. So we need to use the tool to do better planning, and then once better planning is done, better implementation, and then hopefully a day will come where city officials can actually directly use these tools.
Yes, sir. We all are waiting for that day that when it happens. So, sir, thank you so much, sir, for giving us a wonderful presentation and a very brief idea about how the shift flow diagram and how tools can actually help our city to grow on livable and sustainable for everyone, inclusive of planning, sir. And I would really like to thank you once again for joining us to join our initiative. And thank you, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure is all mine here. Okay. Bye.
Okay, sir. Bye, sir.